Okay, Exabeam, you fairly recently published a report on AI and security, and I guess it would be good to understand if there was, what was the major finding?
I think we found a lot of interesting facts as we went through it. We did a survey where we talked to over 1,000 security professionals, mostly focused on security operations. And what was interesting when we dug through the data is we found a real divide between the way that hands-on SOC operators felt and the way that their management or leadership teams felt about the impact of AI on their productivity. And just to wrap it up briefly, the management had a very strong feeling, kind of 70+%, that they were getting real benefits from the use of AI on their teams, while the rank and file very much disagreed, and most of them found that they did not believe that they were getting productivity enhancements.
Okay, yeah, so I mean, maybe just to follow that up in a bit more detail, executives broadly a positive experience with AI, they believe it's helping to reduce costs, enhance efficiency and strategy even. And the security analysts felt that AI was delivering, I don't know, false positives, alert fatigue, and wasn't particularly doing a job that better than the humans. And perhaps, yeah, compare and contrast those two views of it, if you like.
Yeah, I don't think we want to say necessarily that AI is delivering false positives or causing alert fatigue. They had that already without AI.
Okay, yeah.
What they had with simple if-then correlation rules was a lot of false positives and a lot of fatigue. And I think the hope has been that introducing AI would make that better. And I think from talking to people about this subsequently and trying to get my fingernails underneath what this means, I think there's a couple things. I think the leadership, you know, they're forward looking, they're leaders, and they're spending their time being barraged with marketing by cybersecurity companies that says, now with added AI, better for you. And they're seeing amazing demos of what this can do, and they're investing their dollars in it. Um, One of the things I think I've realized over the past couple of years is we're living in an era where it's never been easier to create an amazing demo of AI capabilities since the introduction of ChatGPT. It's easy to slap some paint on it and make a chatbot that looks like it solves all your problems. And we know that companies are investing in these technologies. I think the more interesting part is the individual operators and what are they feeling. And we touched on it earlier. They are feeling under pressure. There are so many alerts, so many things that they're being asked to deal with. Um, they have no time to even learn to use these new tools or figure out how to maximize them. And I think the other thing that we really see is that's going to be the real test of if these things transparently deliver improved value to those hands-on operators, and at what rate does that start to happen?
Okay, I'm also curious. I mean, one imagines that the executives talk to the security folks occasionally. So why is the district, how come the executives haven't asked the security folks who have then given them the feedback and say, no, it's not all, ro bed of roses. There are issues, or is it just too early? As you say, the AI people have bought into the marketing. It's been introduced, and they haven't sort of yet done the whatever it is, 3 months, 6 months check as to how the project's going. So they just, as you say, have bought into the what they've been told in the demo.
I think it's certainly early. I think some of the skepticism is justified, though. I think that when we look out across the range of AI tools, and cybersecurity was really one of the early adopters of AI, even pre-Chat GPT, looking at using older predictive AI algorithms to try and enhance workflows. And I think that's seen mixed adoption over the industry. There have been certain cases where that's clearly been very successful at helping narrow down the field of alerts and try to screen out a lot of those false positives. At the same time, until you get to a threshold where those are 100% reliable, we've still built the processes where, frankly, management demands that we investigate every single one of those by hand to determine if it's a false positive or not. So even if those AI algorithms are helping screen down the ones that are important, the human investigators are still in the loop in every one of those decisions. And I think that's one of the things that we see about these um, kind of current and previous Gen AI technologies is that they demand that the humans be in the loop for every decision. And I think one of the things that we are seeing now is a transition into more agentic, more self-starting technologies that are going to do work without the humans prompting them to do it. And I think that's a transition that has to happen for the rank and file to feel that productivity increase is they need the AI to go off and do work without it being asked.
Okay, so it sounds as if right now at least AI is not eliminating manual work, but maybe should we say it's sort of reshaping it when it comes to security, that the humans are being required to do something slightly different. Does the AI at least sort of triaging and getting, you know, highlighting issues quicker than it would take the humans to obviously spot them? Just talk us through that sort of scenario.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the other things to highlight when it comes to why is it the rank and file feels like this is that the environment they're operating in isn't constant. And they're not necessarily thinking strategically this way. They're just thinking about the way that they feel from month to month. But when we look at the last 2 years, what we've seen is the cybersecurity environment get inherently more dangerous. And we're collecting more data as a result. CISOs are putting programs in place with more tools that gather more data that are demanding more analysis. And one of the reasons for this is the fact that we've seen very clearly the attackers are adopting AI tools at least as fast as the defenders, if not more quickly. And, what we saw last year was the likes of OpenAI and Google and others putting out studies where they talk about their attempts to stop hackers from using their technologies for offensive cybersecurity. And their headlines are usually something like, um, we are mostly successful at stopping hackers from using our technologies. If you turn that around, we are often unsuccessful at stopping hackers from using our technologies. So people have been leaning into this, learning how to do it for a couple of years now. And they're using it from everything from uh, enhanced reconnaissance to zero-day research to enhanced phishing campaigns. And all of this puts more pressure on us. What we've seen this year, though, in 2025, is a dramatic acceleration in this. And with the introduction of these AI models like DeepSeek from China, all the limiters are off. The bad guys now have access to what we would call frontier class AI, completely free with no guardrails and no one trying to stop them from using it. And so that's the other thing we have to think about is the balance is in this environment, even if we are seeing an uptick in productivity in the SOC from these tools, and I think we are seeing an uptick, it's being offset by the demands that we're putting on those teams. So the defenders need to continue to lean into this, but in fact accelerate their efforts.
Okay, and you mentioned there the uptick in productivity. As I say, I think the survey reveals that AI is seen to enhance productivity. And another positive I think I gleaned was that there are lots of benefits from AI when it comes to threat detection specifically. So what's going on there?
Yeah, I think we've seen this in my conference presentation at RSA in San Francisco this week. I highlighted some different case studies where we looked at different organizations that were attacked by some of these international ransomware rings. And, this is every CISO's worst nightmare is that somebody sneaks in through a phishing attack or a compromised credential of some sort and encrypts your network and, basically puts you out of business. And what we've seen is that the companies adopting these AI technologies, they have every company has a range of cybersecurity tools, and they have endpoint detection tools and network detection tools, and they're all disconnected in silos. And if you just try to operate from those, you're going to get a range of little alerts that tell you about little things, and they're going to come over a range of time. And these ransomware attacks, they're not a single event. It's a single thing. Somebody comes in, deposits something, moves laterally across the network, deposits more and more things, gets themselves staged, and then they flip and take over your network. And it might be hours to days after the initial breach. And that's one of the reasons these have been so hard to detect, is they're kind of what's called low and slow. And it's just they move in and they creep. The AI tools, though, can approach this differently. And they're not waiting for the alert from the endpoint manager about the virus actually running, or the alert from the network about the data leaving the network. They're looking for behavioral cues. And these AI tools, when they're used properly, are in use all the time, and they're baselining normal behavior, and they know what the normal course of operation of business on your network looks like. We build models, multiple machine learning models for every single employee in your company for different aspects of how they act. Where do they log in from? What computers do they use? What applications do they touch? What hours do they work? Any one of these by themselves, if we triggered alarms when you logged in early in the morning or late at night, you'd drive everyone bananas. But when you put them together, you can see these larger patterns. And that is what we saw in some of these ransomware attacks. Was the AI was able to spot these within minutes, where if it hadn't been present, sufficient alarms don't go off to alert somebody really until hours and hours later, when it's too late. You've had hundreds of credentials compromised, hundreds of assets, and it's too late for your defenders to clean it up before you're taken over. And I think that is the power of what we see for detection from AI. Is it's the ability to really supercharge all of these things that you have in your environment and bring them together and synthesize them in ways that you couldn't before.
Okay, but intriguingly, bear in mind what you've described there, where AI's, you know, detecting things far more quickly and, if you like, and more complicated patterns than humans could. That I think the report suggests that people aren't really trusting in AI's autonomy, whereas I guess logically, from what you've described there, the next stage would be for the AI to, not just spot things going on, but take the necessary corrective action. But that's a step too far for people, is it? Or
Well, I think what we're seeing now really this year is the beginning of rollouts of that next set of technologies. And, what I described there in terms of what we would call user behavioral analytics, that's been available for several years. And, different vendors have had different levels of success with it. Um, Exabeam really prides itself on that capability. But again, if what that creates is more net alerts, that means more work in the SOC. So the next level has to be, how do we help those humans investigate these things dramatically faster? And that's really where this shift to um, agent-based technologies come in. And rather than giving everybody an AI chatbot buddy, which can be useful, right? If you have a chatbot that's trained with some security data and you have an entry-level analyst, they can ask questions there, they can get additional information, and we've seen that to be helpful. But these agents take a dramatically different approach. And at Exabeam in April, we introduced what we call Exabeam Nova. And this is a set of agents that have access to your cybersecurity data, but are proactive now. So for every one of these alerts that comes in, we instantly have the agents pick them up and run an end-to-end security investigation on that incident. And so when the human comes in, what they're greeted with is not an alert and a set of raw detections. They're greeted with a report that says, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I think caused it. Here are the risks, and here are your recommended next steps. And it's just that tight. And what we've seen is that operators are saying that that's 3 to 5 times faster than it used to be. And that's the dramatic uptick that I'm expecting to see as we move from kind of these first gen AI technologies in cybersecurity into these agentic technologies is a dramatic shift in the productivity. And those are really just becoming available this year, and that's going to be the hot topic in cyber for this year and next year.
Okay, and I'm guessing what you've been describing up to now means that security teams are likely restructuring in some way, shape, or form. So traditional job roles are maybe disappearing, and people are having to undertake slightly different roles. How is that? Is that correct? And how easy is it to um, organize such a transformation, or is there some kind of pushback? Just what
It's
you bumped
it's
into?
a great question. I think we see it in the news everywhere when people talk about the coming of these AI agents and the unemployment wave that it's going to cause. And I'll leave that to the economists, but we've certainly seen, every time one of these waves of technology comes in, it causes some disruption, but there's still lots of work to do. And I think if we come back to cybersecurity and we go back to that idea that the defenders are completely outnumbered and completely overworked, what we're trying to do right now is not eliminate analyst jobs. We're trying to bring some balance to the situation. And if we can get the analyst's head above water and allow them to focus on planning and improvement, maybe we can tip the scales to make it so cybersecurity doesn't feel so fragile. I mean, there's a reason that we see news about large breaches every week. It's because our cyber defenses are fragile and our defenders are outnumbered. And so I think the hope in the cybersecurity industry is that by bringing these agents to bear, we can bring people's head above water. And I think one of the places that we're looking for that is the investigation use case that we talked about. The other one that I really believe is going to be a game changer is as we create different classes of agents that are targeted at different roles in that cybersecurity team. And the one that we've just introduced is what we call the advisor agent. And the advisor is targeted at SOC management. So not at those individual users and individual alerts. It's really designed to look at your overall security posture and look at the data that you're gathering from all of your cybersecurity tools. How's that getting parsed, enhanced, stored, and what rules and detections do you have running against it? And in that way, we can take all those micro details of the different log files that you're bringing in and turn that into actionable security advice. And so what you can get is a readout that says, this is my MITRE coverage using the framework that shows you the cybersecurity details. And then go beyond that, it will actually help you produce reports that track where you're weak, where you're good, where you should improve, and how do you plan that roadmap from quarter to quarter to improve your defensive posture. And again, it's those capabilities where we try to get people's head above water and then take that to the next level where they can actively be planning how to improve and how to get ahead. That's going to make the huge difference.
Okay, and I'm also wondering, did the report look at any variations, whether it's in different geographical regions or different industry sectors? I mean, are there clearly sort of leaders, if you like, that the folks that are maybe struggling more would do well to look at, I say, whether that's a particular industry sector or parts of the world where people seem to have got on board with this faster than others?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think that when we looked at North America and Europe, which are, obviously the two largest parts of the survey, they were largely similar. But the other two regions that we looked at were actually wildly different. And I thought that that was really interesting. Um, one of which was the Asia Pacific region. And that divide that we talked about between management and the individual contributors, it was the widest there. That was the most skepticism from the individual operators that AI was making a difference. On the other hand, the place where we saw by far the highest indication that they were adopting AI and being successful with it was actually very counterintuitive. It was Middle East. And the Middle East market traditionally has been somewhat skeptical of these new technologies. They were slow to adopt cloud computing, although we're seeing an acceleration there. But for whatever reason, that Middle East market really has jumped on AI very early. And I've seen that in some of my discussions there, because Exabeam does have a large Middle East business, is we're seeing companies who want to jump into the AI wave before they've even moved into the cloud and are trying to figure out how to reconcile that.
Okay, maybe just sort of final thoughts, I suppose. We're sort of marrying AI and security. Is there a sort of recommended approach for organizations, do's and don'ts to make sure that there's a positive experience? As you say, there seems to be this an element of disjoint. As you say, any of the companies you've dealt with where you think they're doing it particularly well, and therefore that's a sort of blueprint for others to follow. What advice would you give, I suppose?
Yeah, so I'll break this down in two levels. And one of the things that happened earlier this year was I took on an additional role at Exabeam, which was as the chief AI officer. And so I'm not just focused on building our cybersecurity products, but also our internal AI usage strategy. And I talk to CISOs all the time, and there's still a lot of trepidation around what it means to allow their companies and their employees broadly to adopt AI technologies. And I think they feel the competitive pressures that are driving them to do that, but they're wondering how do they do that safely? And, just to put it in a nutshell, what I tell people is first, a lot of the concerns you have about data kind of leaving the company and how do you manage that and how do you control it? It's probably more similar to the transition that you took your company through for SaaS than you're giving it credit for. There was a point where people said, am I going to store my documents in Microsoft's cloud? Heck no. Am I going to store my most precious customer data in Salesforce's cloud? No, I'm not. And then most of us went there and did that. And we figured out the procedures to do that, and we figured out the processes to do that. This is actually more similar than you think. It just feels different technologically, but the rules of the road are going to be similar, which is find tools that are going to have impact, figure out which vendors you're going to work with, how are you going to secure them, which is going to come through security um, enforcement, and what's going to come through policy. And so putting those policies in place, training your employees, and making concrete agreements with your vendors around what they can and can't do with your data is critical. When it comes to a CISO and their own teams adopting I think this is really the place where I tell CISOs, you're already an expert in cybersecurity. This is your chance to lean in and learn some of these new technologies, learn how more of the AI technologies work. I work with a group called OWASP, which is the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, which is a open source group with a few 100,000 members. And for the last couple of years, we've been doing research into AI vulnerabilities. What's it mean to build a system with AI? How are they vulnerable? What are the attacks? What are the defenses? I really do recommend that as a resource for CISOs. You can go to genai.owasp.org. All the research there is free and open source. And there's a lot of great educational materials, some of which is targeted down at the developer level. Much of it's actually targeted at a management and CISO level. So there's something there for everybody.
Okay, that's great. And maybe I just ask finally, from your own point of view, are you bearing in mind that the ongoing cybersecurity challenges and now AI is, as you explained, being used for good and bad, I guess. Are you optimistic that AI will sort of improve the cybersecurity posture of organizations, or do you worry that any improvements will be wiped out by the way that AI will enable the bad actors to get up to more mischief, shall we say?
So there's an old joke which just talks about two hunters that are out in the forest and they come across a grizzly bear and they look at each other and they go, "We better run." And the other guy looks at him and says, "You think you can outrun that bear? He's real fast." And the guy goes, "I don't need to outrun the bear. I only need to outrun you." And I think this is the advice I give people, which is if you're a CISO, if you're a SOC manager, you don't have to defend the planet. You have to defend your network. And one of the best ways to do that is be a harder target than average, be a better defended network than the other guy, because those bad guys are going to come after the soft targets first. And there's no question that if you lean into this and you make these investments, that you can become a much harder target. Cybersecurity is a business where everyone knows this is not 100% and there are no guarantees, but the tools are out there for everybody to dramatically improve their posture with these new AI tools. I tell people it's an AI arms race out there right now. The bad guys have it, the good guys have access to it. Your your choice is not to outrun the bear, it's to outrun your competitors and be the hardest target. And that's a great way to keep your network safe.
Okay, oh, it's been brilliant to chat, Steve, and thanks so much for giving us so many great insights into the report and more generally what's going on in cybersecurity. So appreciate your time. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks, Philip. I enjoyed it.